Well, hello.
Hey, Andy. How's it
Uh,
going?
It's going good. How are you?
Well, it's fantastic. Welcome, everybody, to the Untitled Theme Entertainment Design Show.
Here
Uh,
on TETV.
yeah, the TTV. I gotta wear one of those shirts.
We have to
Uh,
talk to my mom. She had it made for me for Christmas. It was so sweet. Hi, Mom.
hey,
I
Mom.
think she's watching today, I'm sure.
If my mom were to watch this show, it would blow my mind because they don't know how to operate their cell phone. So, let alone operating, this. We got a great show up ahead of us. We got a few people in the green room, Tom and Mel, which is exciting. We're going to be talking about a lot of things today. But of course, while we let the audience build up, we're going to talk about the news of the week, of the past couple weeks. And really, there's no bigger news than the Galactic Star Cruiser opening tomorrow. And yep, Galactic Star Cruiser right there, spelled correctly.
There it is.
Galactic Star Cruiser, and
You had the
go ahead. Go ahead.
you had the great fortune of getting to experience it a couple of weeks ago, didn't you? And
I did.
very excited to hear about your experience on there.
Yeah, you can go back to the first slide first, Charlie. Yeah, so my journey with Galactic Star Cruiser is actually an interesting one. I did work and help on the project just a little bit. I think I'm okay to talk about that now, which is great. So happy to chat a little about it. First off, for those fans out there, get your GoFundMe accounts going and get your eBay sales ready to go to experience this. Obviously, I can't think of a more controversial project like in the history of the Walt Disney Company that's in modern social media times, solely
I would
on
definitely agree.
on a few factors, right? We know that there were a lot of promises made for Galaxy's Edge where the entertainment didn't come to fruition. I'm hopeful one day they could. They built a lot of infrastructure for it, as you can see when you walk around it, right? And then they
the
opened
catwalks and everything.
Yeah, and then you go and you walk through, you walk through an immersive experience with so much entertainment, and that's going to cost money, right? And so there's a lot of sticker shock out there for the price tag, which I predict will only go up. I don't. I think it's the floor we're seeing now. I don't imagine it going lower than what it is.
Buy your Galactic Star Cruiser futures now.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, Rich. Yeah, that's cool.
Hey, Rich.
It's good. So if you want to avoid, I'm going to try to make it pretty spoiler free, but about I'll take like 5 minutes or so and just to chat about it real quick. So because it's rare, I get to talk about a project that opened that people actually know about, which is cool. So I actually got started to work on the project to help with playtesting. So you can go to the next two slides. Well, actually in the bridge area, which was that concept art was about. Here's me. I happened to be part of the bridge training because they needed people to come in there and fill roles when they didn't have cast members there. So while they were playtesting all the different things, all the different elements, as you can imagine, there was a lot of playtesting that went involved in this project. I filled the role of what would eventually be an operations cast member, and then interacted with the entertainment folks as well, and just was kind of going back to my operations day. So it was really, I did several times over the course of a couple months, and it was a lot of fun. So there's me reaching my hand out and explaining things in that room, and it was really cool. So I even then I got a little bit of a sneak peek of it, but everything, all the different elements, not really put together. And then I was able to go on a test cruise. That of course there are many of those going on. This was a little bit ago, and we came up with a very elaborate backstory for our crew. You can go to the next slide.
Patrick, I saw you're on a PA mic on there.
Yeah, I was feeling.
How do they handle that in like real life without a PA? How do they handle that operation stuff?
There's a mic down there now, so I was holding it, and now it's like a little thing on a gooseneck.
Okay.
Yeah. So and then they needed to make sure it was adjustable because I'm 6'5", so there were a few things that they adjusted along the journey of it.
But look at you guys.
Yeah, so we showed up in full space ball attire. We had a very elaborate storyline where we were. I'll just repeat it because why not? We were 37 years ago. We lost, 37 or 33, whatever that number is. We lost connection with Spaceball 1, and we're just trying to get home. We were on shore leave here on planet Earth, and this was one of the first vessels we saw that was leaving Earth. And we spent the first couple of days trying to convince the captain to alter course to go to Spaceball so we can get back to our home planet. But we got pretty cozy with the First Order, and Lieutenant Croy was a part of it, because we were very easily persuaded along this journey. And then
I bet you were.
And I got to tell you, so that was like day one. Day two, you know, when we have the Batu experience, we're like, are we really going to walk out into Batu like this? And we did. So immediately we get swamped by people, and we're like, no, we can't. We're not allowed to be a distraction. You know, we're not supposed to take pictures and all that. It was pretty ridiculous. And then of course we went on Rise of the Resistance and that attire as well. And I don't know. I don't think people were ready for it. Like, they need to be ready for it. And now this is a thing, right? And now people are going to be living out there. I
wasn't ready to see it on Twitter, let alone see it in person.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a lot of fun. And then on our journey, we got captured out of. We were on a mission for the Resistance and got captured, and then we're taken to one of those floating things, like not Star Cruiser, but something up there. And then like Kylo Ren tried to kill us, so we're kind of like, hey, maybe that's not the greatest way to approach this thing. And so if you go to the next slide, we converted to Judaism, sorry, and Jediism, and we were having a ball there. That was we were in full attire and all that.
Are you in makeup there? What is blue makeup?
And full makeup, and hair sleeve, full Jedi outfits and all that. It was a lot of fun. I'm just gonna pull this off screen. I don't know if I've shown, or if I've shown too much. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was, yeah, go ahead. I will answer any question you have, just maybe like a top 3 questions or something. I know we got guests.
Okay, I think the most important question that I have is, how are the drinks? Did you try all the intergalactic cocktails?
I am not a. We brought our own drinks.
Oh, you can do that.
You can do that. So we brought our own drinks. I'm not the kind of guy that's going to go and explore a whole sweet drink menu. I'm more of a just like, okay, whatever it is. I did have one of the ones that was like something to do with something with vodka. It was fine. I'm just not the right guy to ask that question.
I think it's Brandon Clay on Twitter. He said his wife designed all the drinks, and I responded. I said, "Are they all sugar bombs?" He said, "Absolutely not." So
okay,
maybe they weren't all sugar bombs, which I assumed they would be too.
Yeah, maybe not sugar's the right thing to say. It was more like tart or this or that, and yeah, that's just not my vibe.
See, I would have just drank through the whole menu on the first night.
Yeah, you would have done great. You would have done great. All right, what else you got? 2 more questions, and then we'll move forward.
2 more questions. Was the level of interactivity what you expected? Less or more or less?
Yeah, yes, it was.
It was more than you expected?
Let me try to phrase this, because I knew it. Okay, so say that one more time. I want to make sure I answer that appropriately.
Was the level of interactivity more or less than you expected?
I think,
and by interactivity, I mean with like the actors.
I think it was as you would expect as somebody that's billing it as an experience, but it was to the point where you were missing stuff. You knew you were missing things that were happening. They do a pretty good job of juggling the schedules around, but there's things happening places where you can't be. So it was a bit overwhelming.
Let's see. We do a question.
No, they're not.
Yeah, no. All right, one more question. Did it feel like it was the right amount of time, or would you want to have it go on longer?
It was no. You wanted to get out. It is so overwhelming. It is not a relaxing vacation,
No, right.
It is very much a full stimulus. You feel like you're missing out. You want to participate throughout the entire voyage. And I talked about that at the end. It was like, usually on a cruise, I'm like ready to I want to stay. Here I was like, that was great. Loved every minute of it. I need a break. I need a break from all this stuff going on. Like, I was okay with leaving.
So follow up then, so it doesn't count as a 4th question. Follow up to that. Would you pay to do it again?
Yeah. So I think I kind of broke this down somewhere. That's a very personal question for people. A very much personal question about, can they afford to have $6,000 of disposable income thrown out the window? I like the way that attractions management handled that question. They said, look, if you're used to spending you go to Disney cruises, you go on a cruise for 7 days, and you want to truncate it to be a 2-day cruise.
Right.
Yeah, okay, that, you know, it's a whole different experience, right? So I think
I wouldn't classify it as throwing it out the window. I mean, that's
sure. Yeah, so
at the airlock maybe.
But I would say that look, I did not pay to go on this cruise.
Right.
However, I am somebody that, you know, I went on a Virgin Voyage cruise and paid not the same, but pretty high up there. And it is in that kind of category where it's not that crazy. I mean, to me, it wasn't that crazy. Setting aside the whole paywall, a lot of stuff, we wanted characters in Galaxy's Edge. I get all that, fine. But the product itself is overwhelming on the amount of entertainment and really cool. And, you know, tough to market. So I'm glad they got influencers out there to kind of share the personalized stories, because that's what it's all about. You know, it's challenging just to put a photo, you know, an
interview. As they found out.
Yeah, an interview in a non-active bridge and try to make it look cool. It's like, no, it's like you need people to live it, you know. So totally understandable. But that's it. We got great guests sitting in the wings. And you know what? Maybe we'll get the people for Star Cruiser to come on and talk about it. You know, we're trying. So we'll hopefully.
We're trust us. We're really trying. It's difficult to get people actively working for Disney to come on the show for reasons that are, I'm sure, understandable. But we have two Disney veterans with us here today to talk about the story living concept that was announced a couple of weeks ago. To great debate and fanfare. So without any further ado, let's bring them on and let's get into it. I'm really excited about this today. And there's Mel McGowan.
Hey guys.
So Mel and Tom Morris. So great to have you. First off, let's let you guys introduce yourselves and, you know, who you are and your background for people who shockingly may not know who you are. Go ahead, Mel.
Well, hey, Mel McGowan, one of the founders at Storyland Studios. And I've got to say that the segue between Galaxy's Edge, you know, extending the theme park experience beyond an 8-hour thing into, you know, spending the night, living the dream, and then eventually living the story. That's basically what I've been doing for the last 20 years. So I am so excited about the conversation tonight, and especially having Tom on.
Great. Yeah, we're happy to have you. And thanks for helping get Tom on the show as well.
Perfect casting.
Go ahead, Tom.
Hey, so I'm Tom Morris, and I worked at Walt Disney Imagineering for over 35 years and Disneyland for a few years before that. I started when I was very young. And in that time, I worked on a lot of things, not every project, but on a good cross-section of projects, doing a good cross-section of disciplines. And I would say the highlights were Disneyland Paris, working on the Fantasyland as producer and also designer of the castle there, and also the creative director for Hong Kong Disneyland, and helping Joe D'Annunzio come up with Disney Quest for Florida. And the Neon Mickeys, the most important thing.
Can't forget those.
The Neon Mickeys that are in Tomorrowland. Which
still going strong.
2 years.
Actually, I still remember the Disney Magazine picture of you standing over the Star Tours Tomorrowland entrance model, Tom, looking very dapper at the ripe old age of 20-something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was 23, 23 or 24.
You haven't aged a day.
Oh, yeah, right.
Well, it's so great to have you guys on.
Well, before we get started I want to actually jump in on that. So, Tom, you did a presentation somewhere during the blur of the pandemic for, I think, the Walt Disney Family Museum, and you touched on that aspect of your career, and like I'm just talking about the Mickeys, right? In Neon Mickeys, and I had a whole fangirl moment. Like I paused and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the guy. So I mean, that really had a big impact on my life growing up in Southern California in 80s and 90s.
I'm discovering that that's the case with a lot of people. And for me, it was something that was out of my mind for probably at least 10 years. You know, I did it. There was a little bit of controversy surrounding it. And it went in, and I just figured, well, you know, it's a transitional piece. It'll be there for 5 years until they figure out what will really, go in there when they really redo Tomorrowland. And when they did redo Tomorrowland in 1998, and I was going back and forth to Europe at the time, and I wasn't really paying too much attention at that time to what was going on at Disneyland. And I remember going to the opening of that Tomorrowland thinking, there's no way that Neon Mickey made it through, all of that and is still there. And I was really shocked to see that it was still there. I thought, well, another 5 years. And yeah.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
And yeah, it's just funny, you know. And it was kind of a quick, you know, I probably spent more time fighting about it than I did drawing it up. And, you know, it was a very kind of crude animation that I did. And when I can't remember who it was who kind of took it from me and said, okay, but now we're going to have a professional work on it. and they got the best. They got Mark Henn to clean it up and make it really good. Because if they had just copied my scribbles, it would have been really bad.
Well, please continue. I just wanted to take a
Well,
moment.
that's the story on the Neon Mickeys. I think it might, you know, be my most important contribution to the world after the Sleeping Beauty Castle in Paris.
I don't know about that. Oh man. I was probably there with you on opening day of Disneyland Paris too.
Really?
I was in the marching band, the All American Marching Band.
Oh wow, how cool! Yeah,
like, and that night before, where I was just walking around, and there was Michael Jackson, there's Elizabeth Taylor, there's, you know, Ray Bradbury.
Yeah,
yeah, it was crazy.
I cannot even remember that evening, and I don't know that it was because of adult beverages. I think it was just exhaustion.
Yeah, there were still people painting that night too.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Painting scenic.
Oh yeah. Yeah, just
well,
like
let's get to
the construction went on for the first few days on stage.
Yeah. Oh well.
Yeah, people like
it's
it.
A long time ago.
Yeah. Right.
Well, let's get to story living and talk about that and this polarizing new announcement that Disney has made that I think is very misunderstood in a lot of ways. And I'd love to, you know, have our panel here to sort of like bring some clarity and some insight and background to what exactly this is and what it can be and what it should be and what it might turn into.
Mel, why don't you start, since I really don't know too much about.
Okay.
I'm kind of an impartial observer.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
and I bring my history and my kind of experience with a sort of, you know, tangentially with this sort of thing growing up.
Well, I thought you had to be on because of that historical perspective, Tom, because I think so much of the pessimism and negativity around the project does relate to, you know, the whole what would Walt do, you know, kind of original intent, and having that historical perspective. I think, especially of that golden age of the late 60s, that New Orleans Square, New Tomorrowland era, Epcot planning days, I think is so key to the spirit of what we're talking about. But yeah, I mean, my understanding of the project, really what we're talking about isn't really even a project. We're talking about a press release. But in a lot of ways, it could be seen as a culmination of seeds that certainly existed in Walt's mind. The idea of what would it look like to take his wiring, you know, his hunger for community that he had, you know, kind of almost not quite birthed in him, but he grew up in Marceline, Missouri. What would it look like to fuse that desire for human scale pedestrian community, you know, in that post World War II LA sprawl, and fuse that with his gifts as a storyteller and give people a chance to live a life that they can't live, you know, in the normal United States of Generica. And, you know, I think different people have tried to take that torch to different levels of success and failure. And this is the latest attempt, apparently, that someone's trying to pull something off that's a little different than your standard generic tract.
Well, let's bring up the slideshow so that we can show some pictures about exactly what we're talking about from Cotino, as it's called, and with this big mid-century modern breeze block wall, swooping wall that they've got there. I mean, you know, you mentioned this, you know, the spirit of Walt and the spirit of community that he had, and I do wonder if this development, which is not designed by Imagineering, by the way, everybody thinks it is, it's not. It's designed by the, you know, developer architects, I guess, you know, with approval of Imagineering. So like, I really wonder how much of this was intended and design intent of this sort of Walt Disney Epcot spirit of community kind of ethos. I mean, I really do wonder about that. I mean, you know, because it's not for everybody. It's not, you know, this sort of like economic and cultural utopia that Epcot was meant to be. But I mean, I do wonder about that. What do you guys think?
Well, I think there's a easy pessimistic perspective, because you're right. Absolutely. You read the disclaimers and it basically talks about a branding and a licensing deal,
Right.
of an existing development. A couple of disclaimers. One is the developer in charge of the almost square mile we're talking about here, over a square mile, 800-ish acres, is DMB. Pretty respected land developer, partnered with a lot of families, including the O'Neill family, that actually is the historic landowner of the chunk of Orange County that I've raised my kids in. So I'm actually in one of these DMV Truman Show type communities called Ladera Ranch in South Orange County. So I kind of think of myself as a little bit of a guinea pig. And I know, Tom, you were also a guinea pig growing up on the Irvine Ranch back in the day.
Right.
And I think that Orange County kind of test bed that really, I think, was influenced by Disneyland, actually is kind of an interesting perspective to bring to some of this. But in a lot of ways, Hart Howerton, the firm that designed the specific plan, that's got the land use approvals for the site, that really is a high level governmental. It's meeting CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act. It really is just a high level planning level of design that's been done. I would still say that there's a whole lot of design decisions left to be done. But the Crystal Lagoons technology in the middle of the project is fairly radical. We're involved with a project in Arizona right now, and that's something that I don't think a lot of people are aware of or talking about. But it's basically dropping a chunk of Bora Bora in the middle of the Sonoran Desert, which is kind of cool. Water tends to bring life in the desert, and it's definitely the original reason that Palm Springs, the Indian Canyons, Agua Caliente tribe is there to begin with. So you really have this unique Garden of Eden starting point that whether it's DMB, the Imagineers, Hart Howerton, they've already got a lot of heavy lifting done for them in terms of a really compelling space.
So what is that Crystal Lagoon technology you're talking about?
Well, it's a biochemist developed it. You can Google it, look it up on YouTube. But basically, it creates these, I believe, saltwater blue lagoons without, the typical technology you find in resorts and pools and what have you. But essentially, it's imagine like a choline lagoon, but even clearer and better and nicer. And you surround that with white sand beaches, and it's what Bay Lake and Seven Seas Lagoon might have tried to be on opening day, but it certainly isn't now between the gators and the natural algae that's out there. So again, it's that idea of an oasis in the desert. I mean, that sand beach in the middle of the desert. I mean, Palm Springs is a sweet spot to be right now. Modernism Week in the winter season, snowbirds, but in the summer you combine kind of a blue lagoon with a dry heat, and it kind of beats a lot of different places that a lot of themed entertainment is happening right now, whether it's Orlando or Dubai, in my humble opinion. So there's some potential there.
Well, let's go over the plan, like what they've got planned so far as what was over what they're announcing. We have a couple of master plan renderings like that one and the larger one. Let's start at the larger one and work our way in.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. This is right out of the public document that I haven't really seen too much out and about in the press, but I mean, when you actually look up the specific plan for the site, this was approved pre-COVID a few years back. And it probably looks pretty familiar to Tom. I mean, this is part of an evolution of planning, of trying to not just do standard suburban tracks. And when you have an opportunity, something larger than a square mile, to blend pedestrian paseos and trails with some natural features, or in this case, kind of these hybrid features like this man-made lagoon. It looks a lot like a lot of master plan development that I think a lot of ways had roots in Southern California and has now gone around the world. A lot of it does reach back to pre-World War II attempts of social housing and having different densities and not just designing for cars, not just having cul-de-sacs and arterials and tract homes and strip malls, but actually having notice in the corner there, that zone in the red. I think someone was mistaking it for downtown celebration. It's all part of this new urbanist trend of trying to create a little bit of a 5-minute walk radius at your 100% intersection, and then having decreasing densities in here. One of the key things, though, that I think that's worth pointing out is typically in these types of communities, it's not golden oak. It's not just a gated community with $1 million plus homes. I mean, the idea is that you're providing a pretty rich range of housing options from, rental, studio, flats, all the way to, whatever the large lot, type homes. They did the same thing in Celebration. They do the same thing in most of these master plan developments. But what it ends up doing is it does hypothetically allow someone to, to maybe be able to work in the community that they serve in, if they're a teacher or a firefighter or what have you. And that's been, kind of an under-recognized thing, at least here in Orange County, where it's a lot more diverse than most people expect it to be.
And you could say it is kind of a, if you're going back to like Greenbelt communities and Victor Gruen and Ebenezer Howard and all of that, even though it doesn't appear at first glance to be radial, so to speak, it is kind of applying the radial principle of the high density, either in the center or in this case in the corner. And then as it spreads out, it becomes lower and lower density and more open.
Yeah, and the Victor Gruen, Ebenezer Howard thing was definitely a big influence on Walt back in the day. This was from the cover of the book, one of the books that was on Walt's desk when he died. I think it was called Heart of Our Cities by Victor Gruen, which you might know him as the guy that created the mall. But beyond that, he really became this kind of post-World War II urban planner. He designed Lagoon and Niguel, for example, Valencia in Southern California. And, again, he took the Garden City idea that started in Europe and brought it to the United States. This was a proposal actually for a Washington, D.C. World's Fair that would turn into this future city. My understanding is that this deeply influenced Walt's original conception of Epcot, the city.
Yeah, it did. This and the books by Ebenezer Howard, and also he was working with James Rouse at the time and had visited Columbia, I think, just as it was getting started. And there's a little town in Maryland called Cross Keys. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it. And it's the same kind of thing. It's like the Bluffs that I grew up in.
Yeah.
Where the idea is you don't have to drive everywhere. You don't have to drive to the grocery store or to school or any of that. And so it's, in a way, it's discouraging use of the automobile.
Yeah. And I mean, again, this had some roots pre-World War II, FDR, New Deal. Greenbelt, Maryland, actually was one of those first kind of projects that very much is this kind of pedestrian Greenbelt, Paseo, town center kind of model. So it's an evolution of that theme. So again, I think it's just understand it exists in a planning continuum. It's not completely, from ground up.
Well, speaking of theme, I mean, I think one of the most interesting aspects of this latest press release, we're calling it, is that it's called story living. And, you're supposed to be able to sort of somehow live and continue to live in this Disney story, and it didn't really elaborate on that or talk about that at all. It kind of left a lot up to the imagination, and boy, was there a lot of imagination, especially on Twitter, about what that meant.
I have a feeling they're spending quite a bit of their time right now figuring out exactly what that
I would think so too.
Well, I mean, one job right now is, what did we mean when we released that?
Yeah,
it's easy to throw the word story everywhere, right? Like magic and wonder and story.
Yeah. I mean, I think they came up with the name and just ran with it, and then we'll figure it out later.
Yeah, and hopefully it means more than just naming the streets after the Seven Dwarves and Huey, Dewey, and Louie and that sort of thing, which would be the low-hanging fruit, easy thing to do. But also, to counter that, hopefully it's nothing too complicated either, because I would hope that a company like Disney would give you the tools to create your own story, not have to live by some artificial, backstory kind of thing, where some story is made up and you're supposed to believe that lake appeared there because of some reason,
Right.
That's kind of another superficial approach to it, versus what I liked about where I grew up is that we were always riding our bikes around those trails, and there were just, it seemed like an infinite number of trails and sequences that you could take. And we kind of created our own stories by doing that. In fact, I remember even at some point thinking about coming up with a ride for Disneyland, as I would drive around the bicycle trails. So It was the environment that kind of created the tools for my imagination to create my own story, and not have to kind of, you know, confine myself to someone else's story.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to be like a themed experience. I think it would be, like you said, it would be exhausting to, you know, suspend disbelief, you know, 24 hours a day, 7
Right.
days a week. You know, it's just like, you know, it'd be like, you know, you're an actor in, like you mentioned the Truman Show earlier, Mel. It's like, you know, you could see it's exhausting to, you know, maintain that kind of suspension of disbelief. You know, suddenly you're an actor and living his work.
Well, we do feel like that sometimes. We're one house off of Main Street. We've got a town green at the end of the street, and
you'd be
a
like,
little
howdy,
Main Street.
neighbor.
It is a little bit, yeah. So we get frustrated. Right now, I just fixed some HOA violation because my trim wasn't, you know, quite up to standard. So that's part of living in these deals. So you're living on stage. So
wow.
you know, but you know, I think that you know, obviously we're just speculating now, and it's fun to do it with you guys, writers and visionaries. But you know, one of the approaches I could see them taking is what I like to call soil specific storytelling. I think Disney's historically, you know, always, I mean, as a person, as a company, been able to take stories from different contexts, whether it's, you know, Walt borrowing from the Grimm brothers in the Black Forest of Germany, whether, you know, whatever, and being able to somehow, you know, culturally, you could say appropriate or translate or you know, just do this unique hybrid. And in this case, in the Coachella Valley, I mean, again, this is just the first of several of these locations, but man, what a rich context. I mean, right when I left Disney in '99, my first clients were the Morongo Band of Mission Indians, the Cabazons. This is the Agua Caliente Band. But again, natives, indigenous people have been living in this valley for over 2,000 years. And, you know, as I dug into some of those stories, just for design cues, because they didn't really have a built architecture, a placemaking kind of thing that we could rely on when we're building hotels and casinos and destination resorts, we really had to get into some of the specific creation legends and stories. There's just such an amazing context here of this valley that is, you know, literally an oasis in the desert, water in the desert, shade in the Indian canyons, hot springs in the winter. And then you combine that with the whole, you know, cowboy frontier thing. And then you layer in the Rat Pack, Golden Age of Hollywood thing. I mean, there's just layers and layers of rich, fertile storytelling soil that Disney historically has been able to, you know, I mean, we're another disclaimer, we're a timeshare owner at DVC Aulani. And again, with the job that Joe Rohde and team took in elevating kind of the native Hawaiian kind of arts, crafts, stories, legend, contemporary artists, I think is a great example. It doesn't necessarily have to be Disney IP, and you can always add that in later. But I think if they just slapped Moana all over Aulani, which I'm sure they're doing at some level, but it would really not be as rich of an experience if it didn't, you know, really start with the local stories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it looks from the art that they released like this, the one that we're looking at now, is they're leaning hard into that mid-century modern sort of Bob Hope, Frank Sinatra era kind of architecture, you know, with the sweeping lines and the breeze blocks and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and now's the week to be there. I mean, Modernism Week, if you haven't been, it is the time to be there. It's just so great. I mean, the art, I mean, and that's really about downtown Palm Springs, but even Rancho Mirage, specifically where this project is, that's where the stars chose to have their homes. And I mean, there could be ways of tying into. I was really fortunate to get to hang with Tony Baxter 1 week at Smoke Tree Ranch, and really understood the personal connection Walt had to that and what he sacrificed in having to hawk his home there to fund the soft costs for Disneyland. And again, there's some deep personal ties. And when I think of the opportunity to tie that into Walt's life, I mean, Palm Springs is Frontierland married with Tomorrowland, married with Adventureland. I mean, it really is just such a great first spot for this. And if it was my job to be the creative director on this, I think there would be plenty of different directions.
I think that's really an interesting way to put it, you know, the combination of those things, and then also the tie-in with Walt and Smoke Tree Ranch. I can imagine leaning into that, you know, more than like any kind of like Disney IP that would be like the story, you know, like jumping off point or whatever you want to call it. But
I really love that one lobby at the it's a DVC at Wilderness Lodge. I don't even remember it, but there's a smaller lodge. It's, really talks about his love of railroads, and it's really a pretty intimate little space. But man, what a great job they did in pulling in, the brogies and kind of the history of Walt's model railroading, and then the backstory of the fictional rail. It worked out great.
oh, wouldn't it be neat if they had like a little live steam train there that he could ride on? Like, well, that would be
They
fun.
have a model. I think they did have a plan to do that actually at one point. But they have. I don't know if it's. I don't think it's the original Lily Bell, but it's a reproduction of Walt's Lily Bell in there, and a whole kind of program about the Walt's fanaticism with the trains.
On that topic, one of the cool things I saw is Walt designed kind of a little, almost like a ride track for his kids for his daughters or his granddaughters to do their little carts around his backyard. I thought that was just the coolest thing.
Well, you mentioned DVC, Mel. I'm not a DVC member, but I know a lot of people that are. I've seen some comments, and I agree with the idea that this sort of feels like the natural extension of DVC. Sort of like, rather than just spending 2 weeks at a property, here you could just live there permanently and have that kind of brand experience. Would you say there's sort of like a DVC brand, and how would that inform something like this, where it's a permanent sort of residence?
Well, I imagine they will be marketing towards me and my fellow DVC owners, because if you can imagine, that Venn diagram, psychographic core, I could imagine along with the other annual pass holders or the former annual pass holders. But I think a direction that I think it's a natural evolution of is actually more like the Adventures by Disney thing, which, I've had one Adventures by Disney experience, and it was actually on Hollywood Boulevard. It was kind of a studio tour, a Walt Disney Studios tour and a Hollywood experience, and that's a perfect example, because I grew up hanging out, playing clubs, hanging it in Hollywood Boulevard. That is a place that needs to be curated and edited, right?
Yeah, for sure.
For a visitor. And you could be standing in a crap hole corner, but have no idea that, hey, that was Bela Lugosi's house down the street. And this,
Right.
There's so much legacy and history there, especially for anyone that cares about film and motion pictures. And it's kind of the same thing. I think that really is the big evolution or revolution here, beyond the branding and the marketing and the, what have you. If they do kind of the software side of this, in my community, it was they called it LMOs, lifestyle maintenance organizations. People know about HOAs, they know about the physical property appearance, but actually one of the family members of the founding ranch family headed up this lifestyle maintenance organization. They were basically like Julie, the cruise director of the Love Boat, and what they were in charge of was creating community, doing the 4th of July shindigs and the funding block parties for every neighborhood, and all these different things that really kind of would create community. But pre-Facebook, our community had kind of our own version of a Facebook, and I think doing that in a way that brings some of the Disney cultural architecture, language, kind of excellence, storytelling. I think that's one of the things that doesn't have to be this big, massive capital commitment, but I think it actually could make a pretty significant difference in both the visitor experience and the lodging and living experience. And that is one of the things I do like about this, in that there's access to that lagoon for just day guests that aren't necessarily coming. There's actually 2 hotels, resorts that are waterfront resorts that are also part of it, so people can spend that night or 2, and then you have the living opportunity. So that ability to literally wade in or dive in is there, and again, different price points. I don't know how much a day pass is for the Lagoon complex, but it probably is not as much of as a night on the Star Cruiser or a day at Disney World. So hopefully that's accessible for more people.
I bet it's probably about $50. I bet that's what it'll be.
When you go to Hawaii, you can get a resort pass and stay at some of the awesome hotel pools that you might not be able to afford $500 a night to stay at the hotel, but for $50 you can use their pools, which is a pretty good deal in my book.
Exactly, that's true. Yeah. One thing I wanted to talk about too, you mentioned that there's going to be, sort of like a resort area as well. I mean, when I first saw that, I thought I was thinking how cool it would be to sort of not transplant, but have the same like original concept that Downtown Disney had at in Florida, with like the nightclubs and the restaurants and all that kind of stuff. Like I can imagine seeing something just like that in this sort of context, for visitors and residents as well. I mean, it would just be just the right size and just the right program for something like this.
Yeah, that village walkable European scale
Yeah.
is absolutely the goal. I mean, even in Rancho Mirage, actually, another disclaimer. I have the DVC at Aulani. My brother has the DVC at the Mission Hills Westin in Rancho Mirage. So we hang out here a lot. And the river at Rancho Mirage was a project designed by John Jurdy, where again they did a little mini reflecting pond to bring life around the edge of the water. That's where the movie theater is, the retail dining entertainment stuff. That's, our family tends to spend a lot of time there, at least pre-COVID, even in the summer. And the opportunity to actually, again, live within walking distance of that, spend the night right above it. It's a lot different than needing to take, a monorail or a bus, to get to downtown Disney. It feels a lot better when it's within a walkable human village scale.
What do you think about the possibility of them expanding this outside of Rancho Mirage to other locations, around the country, around the world, perhaps?
If it works, I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
Well, they're surfing a pretty massive demographic shift, with aging boomers. I'm jealous of all my empty nester friends. Lori and I are, we just turned, I'm not going to give our age away, but, we're looking at the day when we don't have quite as many kids in the house. And, the opportunity to live somewhere is something a lot of people are looking at. And, to be honest with you, I know a lot of people feel like it's a stretch or just a money play, but if you talk about the massive amounts of investment money and the buying power of that aging boomer crowd, as evidenced by like the Villages, we didn't talk about that, but the Villages, about an hour north of Disney World, is competes with Irvine every year. I understand is the fastest and largest master plan community in America, if not the world. It is a bizarro. I mean, you talk about Truman Show. That is a Truman Show bizarro land place, and they actually have 3 separate downtowns that are each larger than Downtown Celebration and each very much themed, designed by a theme park design company. I think Spanish Springs is themed kind of like a St. Augustine. There's like a Texas Cowtown, and then there's like a Mayberry RFD, basically kind of a celebration type downtown. But it is strange to be under 50 and hanging out there.
Was that Foreck that did that? I think
so. Yeah.
Well, you talked about the boomers, the aging boomers. It seems like the real market out there is themed senior living, a senior living village that is not like any of the ones that we've had to visit. No mauve walls. It won't smell like creamed corn from the cafeteria. It will be like the W of senior living, where you have fitness, yoga, massage, rock and roll, artisanal dining, and all of that, because we're not letting that stuff go in 20 years or 30 years. But no one's done it when you think of it. I mean, there's some that are better than others. There are some that are less geriatric feeling than others.
Well, that's the new trend, is the integration, though, because that is part of this. Right. They have announced that active adult piece is part of this. Yeah, but in my area, the next town that DMB is developing is called Rancho Mission Viejo, and rather than having a gated senior complex and then the all ages, these homes sit right across the street. So I mean, they're integrated. They're not separated. Your grandkids could live across the street from you.
Right. That's actually very smart. I mean, this whole thing to me just it gets down to execution. How good it is, how smartly everything is put together as a system, and that's really what matters. It's not really so much the superficial. What's the story? What is the story? It's how everything is put together, and hopefully, there's an element of sustainability that people
Mhm.
can point to with pride and kids can learn from. And, so I think the learning element and the environmental element will be an important piece. Those are usually the first pieces that are removed during the, so-called value engineering. So hopefully that sort of thing will, make it through, because without it, it is just, it's another community, and it might be more well done than other communities, but it's got to have something to it that you can point to. And when your family visits, it's the thing you say, this is why we live here. More than I'm sure the lagoon is going to be a really nice attribute, but it seems like it's going to require something more in order for it to deserve to be Disney, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I was dialoguing with Joe Rohde, who I think again has led the way in some of this kind of geographic, spatial, soil specific storytelling with some of the work that he was in process with the new island for Disney Cruise Lines, with the Villages Nature project outside of Disneyland Paris, where they're not Disney IP, but they are very sustainable and culturally sensitive. And I think he was kind of tripping out, like, why is there a big body of water in the middle of the Sonoran Desert? Apparently, according to, again, some of the CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act documents, because as you know, if you're not from California, you may not know, we've got kind of a water issue out here. But supposedly, this is actually more water drought tolerant, water sensitive, or less intensive than a golf course, which is, that's really kind of everywhere out here. And I think that's one of those things that it does kind of give it a little bit of an advantage away from all the other kind of senior housing kind of communities out here, out in the Coachella Valley.
Well, you mentioned, you guys talked about the demographic shift, and the sort of like the target audience for this kind of thing, would being sort of like I don't say aging boomers, but the older Gen Xers and the boomers. I think part of the outrage or the reaction to this announcement was like, the collective outrage of like, oh, is this only for rich people, the 1% or the 2% or things like that? And it's just like, well, yes, because the older Gen Xers and the boomers are the ones that have all the money. They've worked their whole lives, and they've saved, and also conditions were vastly different during their working years than they are now for millennials and even Zoomers and whatnot. But I think that a little perspective, I think, is required when you talk about developments like this, where it's just like, yeah, they exist all over the world, and it's it's sort of like it's a development by a real estate corporation. It's like, of course, it's going to have a target audience, and it's not going to be for people making $20,000 a year. So, I mean, I think, and I think talking about that and versus also like how the licensing deal would work, in your opinion, between Disney and the developer.
Well, just I can tell you one asset. We're working on a few of these types of story-driven kind of community things at this scale. One's in Atlanta around Trilla Studios, where they filmed all the Marvel movies, formerly known as Pinewood Studios Atlanta, creating a whole 1,000-acre cultural ecosystem town where people can live a better life and tell better stories. Another one's actually in Nigeria, in Lagos, Nigeria, Nollywood. And again, in all these cases, I can tell you from a business perspective, when you're developing something at this scale, you really, this is a lot bigger than Golden. You don't just design for one demographic. You really need to hit the market at different demographics. In a lot of ways, it's kind of democratic. It's kind of like what Disney did in Florida, where they have like Flamingo Crossings, basically workforce dorm style housing, all the way to all-star motels to I just heard there's I think a 9-bedroom suite on top of the Four Seasons at Disney World. So I'm never going to know what that costs, much less, get to spend the night there. But, you've got this whole pyramid of options. And again, there is a fundamental, because we work with a lot of feasibility market guys, there's this concept of absorption of these projects. They have to hit the market with lots of different projects. That's not even because they're trying to do the right thing. In certain communities, especially in Southern California, they actually are legally required to do the right thing in terms of inclusionary zoning, which either sets aside a certain number of for rental units, in some cases even for sale units. So some of that stuff, we can hope that there's some policy and perspective in place to kind of do something more than just a gated rich man's playground, which there are already plenty of those in Southern California, as we all know, and plenty of those around the world. I think the interesting thing about this for me is the Coachella Valley is actually a very affordable place to live in general for families, primarily because it's not a strong jobs hub there. It would be really great if this project somehow kind of was a catalyst in introducing. I'm thinking about my own kids. I've got 20 something kids. I've got 8 kids. Some of them, I have 8 kids, but some of them are 20 something. And when I think about them trying to, be able to afford a place in Southern California, I really am bummed because that's pretty hard to do in LA, Orange County. To me, the opportunity to shift past that orange curtain into Riverside County, into the deserts, again, if that can be done sustainably, if there's jobs for them, that could be kind of exciting to have people just think of the valley a little bit different, because it definitely went through a period where it was very much a snowbird, old people, sleepy, and that's why all the great mid-century modern architecture was preserved, because there was no economic activity. It was just dead in the water. But I think a lot of people are kind of rediscovering some of the richness of that area, and why at one point in time, people that could have lived anywhere in the world and could have had second homes anywhere in the world chose to have those homes there, including Walt Disney.
And one thing about this that kind of struck out with me, with the reaction online, and of course, reaction online is always going to be pissed about almost everything. So that's one thing. Licensing is almost as old as the industry itself. So that didn't surprise me at all. Walt Disney's working with other corporations, other entities to get things built, whether it's sponsorship or all these things, for such a long time. So it's natural evolution. And, Universal made their entire, brand with licensing. They don't even really operate most of their hotels. They're all Lowe's operated. And so it's a licensing play. It's all that. So I don't think there's anything nefarious about that, right? I think we touched on it. I love that Disney Adventures by Disney analogy, right? Because we know on their website, which has more disclaimers than I've ever seen for story living, was that, look, there's activities that are by Disney employees. And then that's kind of where it almost seems like that could end and begin. But if it's, it's thoughtful design, integrating the story of I love that aspect that you were talking about, Mel, and I think that's great. And it's also an element of the convergence of our industry with other industries, right? Because every single place you go now, there's there may be an experience director if it's at a hospital, if it's a experience center or a brand center. All these things are all having more thoughtful, purposeful designs, and they're all coming for people like us. And I know, Mel, I'm sure you're doing all sorts of projects like that want our expertise.
Well, that was my graduate thesis, actually, was Disney Design Beyond the Berm. And it's certainly kept me busy for the last 20 years. And obviously, there's different levels of immersion and literalness and IP, different levels of literal narrative and storytelling. But at the end of the day, our world desperately needs the type of multidisciplinary thinking and design that brings continuity to all the kind of just fragmented, market realities of just suburban strips and the nastiness of the way normal real estate development happens. So to me, anything that brings the level of intentionality and even just brand assurance that Disney kind of is going to require, I assume, if they're slapping their name on anything, is kind of a good thing, especially when it comes to something as important as housing, especially in Southern California, where we truly are in a housing crisis. And that's one thing I just want to say, projects like this that are providing 800 acres of housing in any way, shape, or form is actually shockingly hard to do in the United States, but especially in California. And so I saw a lot of concern about, being priced out or different people being priced out. But generally speaking, it's, I'm not a greedy developer, but I'm just saying we have a supply demand problem, and 5/1s still, isn't going to solve everything, because not everybody wants to live in that context.
Yeah, and we need more housing in urban centers, not necessarily out in the desert. We need more people, more housing where people work already. Addressing zoning and adaptive reuse issues in urban centers, where especially now, with the sort of collapse of commercial real estate, a lot of cities because of the pandemic and people working from home, I think that, there's a lot of opportunity to make that change and, have zoning regulations changed and just start building more housing.
Yeah, Andy, you're really right in terms of just good urban planning, that the whole idea of infill development, not just doing leapfrog, but I feel like I'm a defense attorney for the project, or for, one of the things that, for example, Tom's neighborhood, Irvine, did shockingly was address that jobs housing ratio, because it started by the family donating 1,600 acres to the University of California. That created such a jobs hub that more people actually commute from LA to Orange County than from Orange County to LA. And again, that's kind of what I'm saying. Palm Springs, Coachella Valley has always historically been a resort area. And, to actually have something that kind of helps mature that, because, it's pretty small scale currently, but that is its own, obviously, job center. And, it's a different type of job. It's not Silicon Valley jobs.
Right. Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think you're talking about your kids and wanting your kids to have opportunities out there. Like I would imagine beyond the service industry, which is the focus there right now with the resorts and shops and restaurants out there. And if we can get I think a great follow-up announcement would be like a Google or Apple or somebody plopping a campus out there. Amazon, but not just a warehouse, but like tech job Amazon.
Well, in a lot of ways, Lake Nona was a similar type of development when that was going through the planning, and now it's the new home of Imagineering and others. So again, that cultural creative ecosystem is kind of slowly starting to get there.
Yeah. What do you guys think? Like, you guys both live or have lived in planned communities like this. And you touched upon the HOA situation. I think it was before we went to broadcast. What do you think the HOA situation would be like someplace like this? Like, how much would it cost? And how egregious do you think it could be?
Well, Tom, you're muted, I think.
I don't know how that happened. Well, I was just going to say, I would expect that the HOA would be expensive and probably worth it in a development like that, where you've got a big lagoon instead of homes that are paying for an HOA. So, to some extent, that's going to be subsidizing the quality and the environment of that. And then, just like any other community, there's people who just hate HOAs, and there is it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? You like it when the HOA enforces someone else's, bad, color decision or enhancement decision, but you're not very appreciative of when the HOA is after you. But I think having some kind of, you got to have some kind of rules and regulations if you're going to have a community like that. A lot of people don't like that. They call that, being kind of Stepford town and all of that. And okay, well, the alternative is you can go out there and it's more or less chaos land, unless you're talking about Beverly Hills or someplace like that.
Yeah,
where you pay it in taxes.
Right. There's definitely plenty of those opportunities for that no man's land out in the desert. If that's the life you want to live.
The big opportunity to me, but I'm naive, is that it seems like a lot of the younger folks, first of all, they're not marrying and having families at the rate that previously that we had. They're not looking for big homes. They're looking for quality of life more than they are space to put their stuff. So I'm waiting for the time when I'll see. I mean, I hear it talked about, but I'd love to see and walk through some model homes, small, smart homes, that are convertible, that are kind of transformable, where you can transform an office into a bedroom or an office into a kitchen. And gosh, I mean, if you Google it, you'll see it. You'll see lots of examples, and I suppose they're building those examples in Japan, but I have not yet. Some of the prefab homes are getting close to it. And to me, it would be really interesting to see some kind of interesting prefab community where the units are arranged in almost a sculptural way, so that everyone has a really great view and everyone is surrounded by a really neat park space where you can meet your neighbors and have barbecues. And we're talking about, 800 square feet or 600 square feet, but high quality of life in a high quality space.
Tom, you just described the project we designed last week. We're doing our own version of a house of the future, community of the future that, takes a standard suburban 5,000 square foot lot, much like you see in the master plan here. And you can divvy that up into, basically 3 units that has the studio, 600 square foot, to the 1,200 square foot 1 bedroom, to the, 2 plus, office, and you have a common courtyard, common living. They all go out to pedestrian paseo. They're stacked so that the one, anyways, it's basically, just messing with that suburban typology and trying to figure out how you could do something that is actually more historic. That's the way that people have lived for thousands of years at a human scale.
Well, face it, what do you need all this stuff for? Everyone my age is getting rid of stuff now. But I know that idea is getting younger and younger. It's not just happening to 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds. It's 40-year-olds. Just like, what? We have stuff. Our house is, 50% full of stuff that we don't use.
And again, I'm not a big fan of the villages, but I can tell you the houses are crap. But the reason people live there is the investment in the public spaces, is in the activities, the community infrastructure, the idea that there's hundreds of clubs you can. I mean, people are so. I think we're so addicted to these digital screens that there's this human hunger for physical connection and three-dimensional space, looking each other in the eyes, especially as you grow older. The fear of isolation, of disconnection. I think that's kind of what this is about, is what it's tapping into, beyond just a simple real estate player.
I saw an office complex, but it was only like 4 or 5 units, but they were the old containers, not old containers. They were containers, that go across the ocean back and forth, and they had been converted and refitted with glass, floor to ceiling glass. And so they were a combination of rusty old containers and high tech glass, and they were, stacked kind of in different orientations. And it was a pretty cool looking little, setup. I don't know how they got around the ADA or if that was an issue, but gosh, it seems like you could do the same thing with homes.
Yeah, I mean, I follow a lot of architecture Twitter, way more than I'd follow Disney Twitter, actually. And I see floor plans and renderings of the kinds of things you're describing all the time, of like very transformational homes, where the only bed is like this Murphy bed, or the bed goes up into the ceiling to reveal a fold down desk, and all that kind of stuff. It's almost like sort of like RV living, but permanent, in that way, where everything's expanding and contracting and folding. It's sort of like a cabinet of curiosities kind of apartment.
Yeah. I mean,
yet
I still, I haven't seen it actualized as a serious, community effort. It's been 10 years since I've been kind of following that. And there's a couple really great companies that are doing these really nice prefab homes. They're still, somewhat large. I mean, they're in the 1,000 to 1,200 square foot range. And I'm just thinking, at some point people are going to say, hey, I'd be willing to live, with an ocean view in a 800 square foot glass or, combination home that was really high tech, that was really smart, and pay the lower price for that, or pay the affordable price, I should say, for something like that. Or if it's not the ocean, it's, it's just that it has a view, that it's nice, that it's not, that you don't have a neighbor on either side of you, 3 or 4 feet away.
The first project one of the first projects we did after I left Disney, there's a community. Our studio, by the way, is halfway between Disney and Palm Springs. So we are kind of out in that Riverside County, lower cost of living. And one of the things that I appreciate about that is we were able to work on this master plan that was a former mining quarry. And we took these 2 pits in the ground and turned them into what's called Dos Lagos, the 2 lakes. And it's kind of this public art installation bridge and, retail dining entertainment around it, a little bit of a Main Street vibe. But what I love is that for our employees that are looking to relocate to Southern California that don't think they can afford LA or Hollywood, they can afford a live work unit right on the water's edge. They can walk home drunk from the bar if they want, or they can drive 15 minutes away, buy a raw piece of land, which one of our employees is doing, design their own home, live on it on the raw land in a trailer. I mean, basically be a pioneer, cowgirl, cowboy. I mean, that's what some of these guys are doing. So you have this range of options that you frankly don't have in most urban areas and most cities. And it really is kind of cool that we've got these wide open spaces out in Riverside, Canada that give you that option for diversity.
Well, speaking of walking home drunk from bars, I was just thinking, because I get to do that, living here in Burbank, I live right near the Burbank pub, which is the best pub in all the valley, in my opinion. And I happen to live about 100 yards from it, which is an incredible amenity. And speaking of amenities, I wanted to do a amenities lightning round with you guys. What Disney specific, because it's Disney Story Living, what kind of Disney specific amenities could you imagine or would you want to see someplace like this? Patrick, you're first.
You want like top 3 or 1 or what?
Yeah, top 3, sure.
Top 3. So love to see like VIP party bus going to Disneyland. So you could go in groups of your friends. Like they would have that chartered out. You'd go for weekend long trips or day long trip and it would all be turnkey. Not very creative, but obviously like a concierge that can kind of take care of whatever you want. That may be on the Golden Oak factor. And then, I'd love to see some like very elaborate mixed use spaces, like a box theater type thing, flex spaces inside, so that there's like maybe they encourage the arts to happen within the space, and it can be kind of a nice community of arts. Those are top 3 in no particular order.
Love it. Tom, you're up.
Well, I might have misunderstood. Are you saying that it would be Disney involved Disney IP, or it's just Disney-esque?
Disney-esque, Disney IP, either.
Yeah. Well, I would think, for kids, it would be great to have. You wouldn't call it Tom Sawyer Island, but kind of a Tom Sawyer Island place in the middle of that lake, where
that would be cool.
Kids, but some place where you can explore,
like a river country kind of thing.
Totally. That to me, that is what kind of gives it a Disney. Without putting a princess or pirate label on it, it's Disney-esque. It's the kind of thing you'd expect to find in a Disney park, and you don't have to live it 24 hours a day. It's just an amenity that's there that you can go to, and it kind of provides the promise, I guess, that something called Disney Story Living would provide. And just as I guess this isn't really so much the Disney side, but I would like to see this integration of different incomes in there, from, I don't want to say lower income, maybe it is. I mean, the Bluffs that I grew up in was effectively the affordable housing, for the area, and we got a little bit of teasing from it, but I think it was kind of bold for them at that time. My dad was a high school teacher, and we afforded a home in Newport. So that kind of bringing different people together communally. I mean, that is what Walt Disney did his whole life. When you really look at it from a different perspective, is he was always building communities of animators, and then communities of artists, and then communities of technologists all together, and then Disneyland, a community. And his last dream was a real community where you could live. And I guess the third thing, oh gosh, I don't know. I want to live in a treehouse. That's all.
Aging Rick
I want
Polizzi.
the ability to, and maybe it's a rental thing where you have to sign up, and everyone, gets at least one night a year, in the treehouse, in the wonderful treehouse.
That would be fun with Chip and Dale.
Yeah,
you need to check out Pete Doctor's treehouse. That's pretty
I haven't had the pleasure, but maybe someday.
Yeah. Well, boy, the first thing I would think of is, again, the richness of the Agua Caliente tribe. It'd be so great for anyone visiting, living this, to be able to tap into the richness of the stories of the indigenous peoples there, rather than being just tied to a casino experience, because that's not really the same destination. That's just a rich, fertile, well to draw from. Another thing I think that, especially if I'm thinking about people living there, whatever stage of life, whether it's kids, whether it's active adults, seniors, to tap in the idea of rather than just consuming creative output by Disney or anyone else, the idea that, I believe we're all creative. We're made in the image of the creator. We're creative. And the idea that there could be attractions or opportunities, almost like Disney Institute, but done better, in a way that you could experience some of the multiple disciplines that go into Imagineering or animation or art and music. And I think that just ties into the overall art vibe of Palm Springs. But I think Disney could do it in a way that's so much more accessible and, ongoing. I don't know. That my daughter is blessed to be part of a charter school called Orange County School of the Arts. And just what a unique, we just feel so amazingly blessed that she can be part of that. And that would be so cool. That would be such a unique thing to have as kind of a keystone in the community.
Be nice. Yeah.
Andy, over to you. Top 3.
Yep. Thank you. It's funny. Like Patrick, I had the luxury of going last. I snarkily quipped on somebody's Facebook when this was announced. It said, "No dark ride, no sale." But but as I think about it, obviously a dark ride is impractical for, it's like just one dark ride plopped in the middle of this neighborhood to be weird. But I think that, because there's this resort element to it and there are going to be outside visitors to it. And I think that some sort of small museum complex with maybe a large format theater experience to tell the story of the valley and the indigenous people and how all the gold rush and the mining and how it got, that whole area got built up into this state that it's in now or will be eventually. I think that could be interesting. I think that Imagineering has shown that they're extremely good, like with the Gene Autry Museum of Western Heritage, I think it's called, something like that, but for the Coachella Valley, I think could be really good and unique in a Disney kind of way. And I loved Patrick's black box theater idea. I think that would be really great. So that doesn't count, but I just wanted to say I thought that was great. I think I would like to see a lounge facility that is like Walt's living room at Smoke Tree Ranch, a large, like blown up version of Walt's living room. This, sort of like how 1901 is sort of like an animator's lounge, from the old studio style, but like a big mid-century modern lounge where you're in Walt's living room having a drink and
or the Smoke Tree Ranch Lodge. Yeah, there's some
something
public
like
space
that.
that are perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
I gotta say, one of my neighbors in my DMV community, he did do a dark ride in his house at Christmas.
I've seen videos of that. It's incredible. I didn't realize that was one of your neighbors.
Yeah, and he's turned it into a whole business. So he's a Themed Entertainment Association member now, and he's rocking and rolling.
That's
given
fantastic.
how popular the Haunted Mansion is and how it has its own huge cult following, you have to have one of these houses be on it.
Yes.
Not a ride. You get to walk through it because, its capacity is not the issue.
And then lastly, I'd love to see a tropical themed bar because, I love the idea of, and it would have to be like a speakeasy kind of tropical themed bar. I'm not going to say tiki because it's, kind of like a cultural appropriation hot button now, but like a tropical drinks themed bar, I think would be a lot of fun in that area as well and be popular with the kids, as they say.
Well, yeah, I mean, Caliente Tropics and some of the Palm Springs Tiki is its own thing. I'm going to defend that to the death.
That shag Tiki,
exactly. It's its own,
maybe even a shag branded tropical Tiki bar. I think could be fun too. For the tourists.
No brainer.
Well, we had a lot of comments come in, and so one we'll just highlight here. When is the community estimated to open? So none of us work on this project. Just to be very clear, we're all just kind of chatting about it and the convergence and the the themed entertainment aspect of it. Most of us have worked on projects that are similar to this or influenced them in some way. I know I have, I'm sure you guys have as well. But we're going to speculate. When is this community estimated to open? Unlisted publicly. You said it's zoned already. Why don't we do, will it open before Epic Universe does? No.
Probably not.
Yeah, any predictions for that? Andy,
will it open before Tron?
Yeah.
Will it open before Tron at Disney World? I would imagine this is a 2026 kind of thing. It takes a long time to get this all going and planning permission beyond zoning, all the engineering and the construction, especially if it's like, WDI led or approved or whatever. I can only imagine, the levels of approval that every, breeze block is going to take. So I think probably, Q2 26.
Okay. Mel, over to you.
Project this scale, it's going to be phased in my guess, and I wouldn't be surprised knowing that how many years it's been underway, and knowing that they approved the specific plan, I think in 2019 or 2018. I would actually guess a little bit sooner. I wouldn't be surprised to see some stuff coming online 2025, at least some elements. But they've got plenty of infrastructure work to do, even while they're doing to be the Disney stuff is almost the finishing special sauce pixie dust on top of the core commercial and mixed use development, resort development they need to do.
All right, Tom, anything to add on a prediction date for this planned community?
Well, scheduling is probably my weakest attribute. But I would say if Imagineering is not involved, it could be phase 1, 2025. And if there's an Imagineering involvement, that would probably add a year or two to it.
Yeah, you got to remember that developers, they're paying interest, or developers outside of Disney have this time value of money thing that they need to start turning revenue.
Yeah, I hope this is not the case, but I fear that Imagineering involvement is showing them some designs when it's too late to make a change, and getting some superficial, color comments or street name comments. When it really should be, integrated from the beginning.
I'm
that would slow it down, but it would make it better.
Yeah. I'm going to go on a limb and say 2024.
All right.
Woohoo!
There we go. Maybe
He's putting it all on black.
Put it all on black.
The preview center will be 2024.
The preview center. I love it.
Well, I must say, we could have you two on to talk about almost any topic. We appreciate. It feels like a lifetime ago when this was announced, by the way. There was like 3 Twitter controversies ago. So I was like, oh yeah,
there was some little war that broke out, and
also that.
Yeah. Of course, our condolences out to the world. What a mess. But we appreciate you for coming on. We'd obviously like to have you back on whenever you'd like to talk about any topic, anytime. We appreciate it, and all of our people appreciate it. Hopefully, it was fun for you to have a casual hangout. So thanks again, Tom. And Andy, any other thoughts before we close out?
No, I really appreciate everybody coming on and Tom coming on at short notice. I do appreciate that very much. And thanks, Mel, for all your valuable insight as well. It's been a really fun discussion. As urbanism and urban planning is a big interest of mine, and I really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you guys so much.
Thanks for
having
having us.
Thank you.